Kevin, happy St. Patty's Day. Great to see you. I trust that you've decided to stay in Buffalo strictly because of its tradition on St. Patty's Day.
Yeah, that's definitely why. In fact, I got a kick out of it this morning driving into the office and people tailgating early this morning already. I saw a group of guys with green on and had beers in their hand. It felt like it was a Bills game, but no, it's good. It'll be a fun weekend here in Buffalo for everyone, and happy St. Patty's Day to you guys.
So we've seen the team chemistry the last week, especially with the Heritage Classic, kind of shine through. The guys having fun. The embedded last night on the Sabres YouTube channel was awesome with Tage Thompson and Peyton Krebs talking about putting roots here in Buffalo and wanting to be here. How about a Western Canadian road trip? Is that another opportunity you see for your team to get closer? I have good stories about when I played and all the good things that we did on the road trip. But do you see that as another step forward?
Well, I do. And I think for a lot of reasons, Marty, and I'm sure you feel the same way as a player. There's times on the road that are opportunity to bring you together, sometimes longer trips. You can gain energy from it. You go to dinner, and certainly a trip out west where, Dylan Cousins has now been in the NHL a couple of years. He's never been to Western Canada to play, and Peyton Krebs and different players that, have roots out west. I just think players love that. They rally around it because we don't go there that often. So, last year you couldn't leave your room and you weren't able to eat as a team, and all the things were way different than, a typical NHL season. So I do think there's an opportunity to bond. As I've said all along, the culture is critical for how we're going to move this franchise forward. Having players that truly care about each other, truly care about the jersey, and want to connect with a fan base, and all of that's a big deal. And, I think that's, over the last week, I think to some extent you started to see probably outside, some of those opportunities that our players could showcase who they are as people and how much they care about each other.
I feel like you're going through the draft all over again, because essentially you've kind of run the car wash cycle like the prospects do when they get selected. You're doing all the media interviews. You know how you have to go through every step after you get drafted? Like, it's been a busy week for you media wise. So we're trying not to ask the same types of questions, but obviously a big talking point has been, building the defense core moving forward to help out the young defensemen that you have. Is there a style of defenseman that you think on the right side will ultimately complement best, let's say power, but Darlene too? I mean, it can go a lot of different ways here, but is there a style that you think works best in this situation?
Well, above style, I'd say it's nice to have really good players and good talented players. So, you think about that first and foremost. And, Sam Ventura and his analytics group there do a nice job of really helping, us with the data and what are they doing when they're on the ice and successful or not successful. And then certainly you blend that with the scouts and then you talk about it. And, I guess, when I look at Rasmus Dahlin and Yoki Haru this year, that you hope that there was going to be a chemistry, but they've really, to me, elevated each other's game. And I think ultimately what you're trying to do when you're putting together, defense pairs or lines or whatever it is, you're trying to put people in a position to succeed, to push each other to get better and better. So, there has been a lot of, questions around that, and especially on the right side, and what are we looking to do? Ultimately, internally, our discussions have been who's out there around the league that could potentially be a good fit. Is there unrestricted free agents potentially that's something we could look at, or even internally? Where are players internally that maybe could be that partner or take, their game to the next level. So I guess in terms of actual style, I think, to complement someone in what they do, you want their gifts to complement each other, right? So if one is really offensive, you want to make sure you have stability. And if one is a really good puck possession, you want to make sure that the partner is able to make those plays and keep the puck, so you're kind of looking at those type of things. And then ultimately they have to get together on the ice and do it. And sometimes it doesn't work, even if it looks like it should work on paper.
Okay, so you said in one of those car wash interviews that you had to go that you can't press the fast forward button, right? I mean, it's not, you have a plan and you're going to execute it. But Steve here on Twitter asked that, he says, do you feel like your plan is working as unscheduled thus far? And what I guess I would take as a step forward is, do you feel like you're ahead of where you thought you were going to be? Are you exactly where you thought you were going to be? Behind? Like, where do you feel your plan is right now with evaluating your team?
Well, I think Marty, it's a good question in terms of the process that you have to go through. It's hard to say when you set out a vision and a plan. It's hard to say, okay, exactly in 3 months this is where we're going to be, or in 6 months or 12 months. But you hope to see progress. But if I go back to the beginning, it was about we have to get the culture right. In my mind, a lot of times culture precedes results. You have to get the room right. You have to get players that really truly care about each other, that want to be here, that want to grow up together, and that are competitive with each other in practice. I put a lot of stock in practice, the types of practice habits and just the way they interact with each other. So that's something that we've seen grow this year, our team get better and better at. These guys really, truly do care about each other. I mean, they've been the ones using the word brothers and the way they've talked about each other, which I think is special. Now we have to continue to hold ourselves to a higher standard. I'm a really big believer in that personal standard, and then you raise it, and then you hold each other accountable because you're raising your own personal standard, and it all works together. So where are we in our plan? I think we're in a spot where we're continuing to identify the young core. We're continuing to identify the players that are going to be part of this group long term and help us, compete at the highest level. And then we want to make sure that we're also continuing to support that with the right type of people in the locker room, the right type of players that can be, I guess the right way to say it is, support not just on the ice, but off the ice, and there's also players that we really do identify that are a big piece of our future that aren't in our lineup right now, whether that's Rochester or elsewhere. So balancing all that, I think we're continuing to work to get better. We have a lot of work to do in front of us, but I like where we are in the process of the plan we put together.
You mentioned Sam Ventura moments ago, and I was kidding you also about sticking around here and not being on the road trip. Is this the first road trip you haven't been on this year?
No, I have missed, some here and there just for whether I was going scouting or, there were times where I was going to watch some of our own prospects play or
right.
some, amateur. So I have not been in every one of them, but I do like to be on the road for the most part. It's good to be around the team and the coaches just to, interact.
Right. But obviously this situation, you have 3 and 4, and the third is in Vancouver. It's late on Sunday. The trade deadline is Monday. So it makes perfect sense to be hunkered down here at your office. But when you mentioned Sam, it definitely had us thinking, okay, your staff has changed and grown since last year. And how does that affect gathering information and the trade deadline, and obviously ultimately the draft? But we could focus more specifically just on this week ahead here right now.
Yeah, so it's for the trade deadline, we've been meeting for weeks. It's myself and Mark Jakmowski and Jason Carmano, Sam Ventura, Jeremiah Crow. And it sometimes it's others involved. Really going through the league, talking about potentially where teams are at, what they could be looking to do. These guys do a great job to help me identify certain teams that they think this may be worth a phone call. So the way we've approached it is had these meetings. I'm proactive. You talk to every team in the league, and sometimes it's just making sure the team knows, hey, here's where we're at. Here's what we're looking to do. Sometimes it may be an idea that, hey, I want to run something by this team. We'd be willing to talk about this. And then they either come back to you or they don't. So, this year's, that's kind of been our process. And like I mentioned before, you have your blend of your scouting, from Jeremiah on that side and the analytics and the data on that side with Sam. You put it all together and you try to make the best decisions you can. For me, I really do believe you have to have a process in place to make decisions. You're not always going to make the right decision. Everybody knows that. But as long as you have a solid process that you go through, I think you're putting yourself in a better spot, whether that's the trade deadline, free agency, draft, whatever that is. So that's what we've been doing. We're in a different situation this year than we were last year. Last year was really challenging with, Taylor's situation. He's, he been a couple of years removed from an MVP season. He had a no move clause, which creates a lot of other things. And so this year is more conversations around teams. No, we have guys on expiring contracts. They're checking in on them, and, we'll see how it shakes out over the next few days.
You did mention the staff that you're working with, and you've added to that staff this year. Is there still more addition? Because a lot of people will compare the Bills and the Sabres and where the Bills were and, the process and the plan, and you've kind of followed that same pattern. The Bills added a ton of new staff people and really built that staff up to make this team go in the right direction. You've added a ton of people. Is there other areas that you are looking to add with your staff in the next few months?
Yeah, potentially. I think it's an important conversation to have that we do have quite a bit internally, and I have with Terry and Kim. For me in the beginning, I didn't want to make any decisions before I had the information. I really needed time to evaluate, needed time to understand where were some of our blind spots, where were the holes that maybe we needed to add staff, maybe was there areas where we had too much cover and we needed to pull back, and just I needed that information, then have that conversation with Terry and Kim. We've gone through that process. As you said, we've added a lot of staff, which we said in the beginning, we were going to add, we needed to add. Now we're, is take a step back and evaluate again as we go into the off season. Okay, where are we at? Where do we need maybe to add? Is it someone in Europe, or, like all those kind of conversations happen. But we're always looking to add. I guess the key to that though, Marty, is it has to be the right people. Whether it's players or it's front office staff, scouting staff, has to be the right people that are buying into something special here. And for me, it's about that. And if you can teach people things, you can work together. But if you don't have that first, it's generally not going to work. So we won't compromise on that for sure.
How has your group reacted to the deals that have already been made around the NHL and thus tweaked your ask or expectations?
Well, I just hung up, on a Zoom call with the staff here to jump into our conversation. So we did spend some time on that. We're gonna meet again this afternoon to go through it a little bit deeper. But I think again, our situation's a little bit different this year, where it's teams know where our players are at. They have maybe certain players they've identified that they're targeting. Maybe it's our guys, maybe it's other guys, but we are now in a position where let's see how these moves, maybe some of these bigger moves, the ripple effect that goes through the league, and where does that position us? We're ready on our end. Now we'll see how it goes. And there's no way to know, honestly, Duffer. Like these things could come down right to the last couple minutes before the deadline, or maybe some of it shakes itself out where things don't happen that you had hoped happen. And the last piece of that is I am balancing what our locker room has today and needs. We have a lot of hockey in front of us. So last year we were in a position where I really did feel we need to acquire assets. We needed to make sure we added, especially draft capital. This year we have 3 first-round picks currently. We have a pretty good setup. Of course, we'd like to add. We need to add to our prospect pipeline. But at the same point, I want to balance what the asset return would be versus what we have today in the locker room and how we need to build moving forward. We have a lot of hockey left, so I want to make sure that we're careful there. So that's all the stuff that's going through, my mind over the next, few days here.
Okay, so here's a kind of a funny and interesting question from Promo the Robot on Twitter. And his question is, if Vegas called you to get some cap help, would you consider it? Because you own the Golden Knights first round pick. So by helping them, maybe that pick would be lower in the draft. Like, how do you balance that? So I thought it was a funny question by Promo the Robot.
So the robots are sharp. Yeah, that's pretty good.
They're sharp. They're asking the tough questions.
Well, I think it's, what you'd have to balance there. Not to you, Marty, to the robot I'm answering. What I would balance there would be, is it benefit us? Is it something that we ultimately think, when you weigh it, is it the best thing for the Buffalo Sabres? If the answer is yes, we do it. If the answer is, I don't know, then we don't, So I think as you always go back to, you have to do what you think is right for your organization. And if you go through the process, like I've been talking about, of how you make decisions, you're not making them emotionally. You're not making them just off the cuff. You've put the thought and the work into it, then, you make your best. But if we thought it benefited us, then the answer is yes, we would do it.
Let me re-ask the question in the form of a human and suggest, have you had more conversations with Vegas since they have entered into injury hell?
Well, I mean, had conversations with everybody in the league, and certain situations teams find themselves in are unique. And that's why the trade deadline's so interesting in some ways, because literally from, a half a week can go by and a team, everything can change from what happened in their lineup to where are they in the standings. You could have a good week or bad week. So yeah, I've talked to everybody. We've talked to everybody internally. What I can promise you is we want to do what's right for us. We're not in the business of being friends and helping other people. If we will do something that we think makes sense for us, we'll do it.
Okay, another question coming from our audience, and it's a tough one. What will you specifically do to win next year? That's from Teddy Bass. And developing is great, but I guess wins and losses are always the barometer, right? So he wants to know, what are you going to specifically do to win next year?
Well, I mean, winning is such a broad term, and obviously this is professional sports, and you're judged every day on wins and losses, and we need to continue to improve and get better, so we win hockey games. Now, in saying that, what are we going to do? You have to stack the little wins every day, and to me, it is so important to have your foundation strong, to have the process in place of stacking little wins, whether that's your practice habits with players, whether that's the culture that we've talked about. These things add up. So then winning becomes a byproduct of what you're doing. The kind of that saying of the score will take care of itself if you're doing the right things. I really do believe that, so we want to make sure we're continuing to push this group to continuing to hold each other to a high standard, to raise that personal standard that I talked about. And I think as we do those things, we'll continue to get better and better. Now, what you can't do is just change development. If a player is 20 years old and they're going to be fully, strong and ready to go at 24 or 25, you can't fast forward. You have to go through the process of just, maturity. And, that's something that we're not going to compromise on. We have to trust that and let our guys grow and develop together.
That word is used so often, development. And going back to one of Marty's questions earlier about adding staff, how do you feel about your player development side, in the sense of, I don't want to do an open evaluation of people in their current positions. What I'm asking is, do you feel like you have enough people? Because you do have a lot of prospects all around the globe, right? So is this an area that you do look at and think, what more can we do to help development here?
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's so Jason Karmanos in his roles and responsibilities between, he and Mark Jakubowski, what they're responsible for. So the player development kind of rolls up under Jason, and Jason and I have had this conversation quite a bit with the amount of prospects we have, and now adding a lot more in this upcoming draft or potentially through other moves. Do we need to add to that staff? We're having that conversation. We're gonna sit down and really talk about it with the two of us, Adam Mayer, who's done a phenomenal job. I've been really proud of our development staff this year. Timmy Kennedy and Nathan Page and Seamus Kodak, just the work they've done, the details of their reports. I read these emails and I have a sense, I can close my eyes and I have a sense for the conversations they're having. To me, what's critical in the player development is trust and communication. They know these players now so well. They know them as people. They know their games, that now they can really sit down and have an honest conversation. If you don't really get that bond, you're trying to talk to a player about what he needs to do to improve, but is that really going to happen? Now, our guys have really done a great job this year in that, and I give them a ton of credit for the work they've done. But it's potentially an area that we would look to add, especially, again, like I talked about regionally, like where would that person be out of? Where would they cover? Do we draft more Europeans where we need maybe a little bit more cover in Europe? That's something that we'll definitely discuss internally.
We just had Don Granato on this week's podcast. I want to know from you, what do you think is Don's biggest strength?
Well, it's clarity of expectations. I've sensed that from day one. I mean, you remember Marty as a player. There's nothing better than when a coach gives you crystal clear expectations of what the coaching staff's expecting of you on a daily basis. And he does it in a very non-threatening way, where he can talk to players about, here's what's expected. Here's how we're going to get you there. And now the door's open. Come communicate with us, the coaches. They do video. So I think that's been a really important thing. And I'd say another part of Donnie that's been really important for this group has been holding people to a standard, but letting them be themselves within that. And what I mean by that is letting their own personality show, letting them on and off the ice. We need people in our locker room to be comfortable, to be themselves, because that's how you get the best out of people. And then, on the ice, making sure in the moment to say, maybe this isn't the right time to make that play, but I still want you to make plays. Like there can be stifling that happens from coaches where it's like, hey, don't turn a puck over, get the puck in deep, and then you're taking creativity away. So it's really important, and something I talk to the coaches about all the time, that we want to enable our players to be the best they can be, to reach their ceiling, but then we just need to teach and work with them about situational awareness and all the things that go along. And when you have young players, that's a constant daily conversation. So I think Donnie, in those areas has been tremendous. And he's also been good with, I think the media overall to help you guys understand what he's expecting on a daily basis with the team. And I think that goes a long way to help, you guys even cover the team.
I was thinking gentle toughness, because I think it's like 1999 tough coach is not 2022 tough coach, but I think he's a tough coach, but he has that gentle side to him. So if you want to say to him, I said that he's a gentle, tough guy, I'd appreciate that.
Well, I'll mention to him, and I thought you were going to talk about his sunglasses he wore on the outdoor game.
Yeah.
I told him he was breaking the internet, looking like a rock star. So.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we talked about that. He was very well. You could never say this about Don. I can't say he was really proud of the fact that it pulled off a good look. No, he was proud of the fact that he made a decision a while ago to get prescription sunglasses for fishing, and that it then turned into a good look for him outdoors at the Heritage Classic. So
it's win-win for him.
It's a total win-win for Don. Okay, here's my stupid trade deadline memory in reasonably recent Sabres history. We were in the bowels of the former Staples Center in LA, and pretty sure it was Tim Murray at the helm. And I believe it was a 7-player transaction with the Ottawa Senators, everyone basically at the AHL level. So that being said, it looks like you've got Mersch and Quinn coming back. Jankowski's cleared waivers. Hopefully this is a good step forward for the Amerks this weekend. Do you look at anything with Jason as far as trying to bolster the Amerks down the stretch run, or are you relying on health of players to ultimately get them to where you hope they get to?
Yeah, we have looked at and talked about a little bit, but I think what you said is probably trumps trying to do something major. Is we do have bodies coming back. Thankfully, they've been in a battle for quite a while here of just, piecing together a lineup. I think Seth and, Webby and Pex have done a great job of just, making sure to continue to push the group there. But when the names you just mentioned, Mersch and Jack Quinn, and with Jankowski there, and Russek's now cleared, and hopefully McInnes soon. I mean, that's some pretty talented pieces coming back into the lineup. So, we're probably going to, focus more the internal, because they were playing so well before, their run of injuries and the issues that they had. So hopefully they can get a healthy lineup and, try to push here hard for the stretch run.
Okay, this or that, because early in the season, I kept talking about, well, these young guys, the Krebs and Quinn and Peterka and Samuelson and all the young guys, they'll come up to Buffalo, but what's more important is their development in Rochester and the playoff run and all of that. I think my mentality's changed on that a little bit, because now I'm like, hey, there's so much to learn at the NHL level. So this or that with you, do you think there is more importance put on finishing the season at the NHL level for some of those prospects, or that playoff push and that playoff run in Rochester?
Man, it's such a great question, Marty, because I don't think it's not black and white in any way, right? Like, I think you have to look at every individual situation and say, okay, what is best for this player, which is what we've done. I've said from the beginning, development for me is critical this year. So how are we going to put our players in a position to be at the absolute, best development spot? Sometimes that's Rochester. There's times where it's here, and I'll use UPL as a perfect example. When he came up here, it was out of necessity, but then he played very well, and he showed our team and himself that he can be a really solid NHL goalie. He was developing in the National Hockey League with what he was doing. has an injury, goes back. Now he's in a spot where he's developing in the American Hockey League. He's playing, he's riding the ups and downs, he's facing a lot of shots. And so there's a situation where you can see it both ways. I think it depends on the player, it depends on the minutes, it depends on the situation. But ultimately, depending on how it shakes out over the next, the coming weeks, I do think it'd be great if we were in a spot where we could get Rochester healthy, we get some extra players down there, and to have these guys have the chance to play in the playoffs or potentially go on a run. And if it doesn't happen, that's okay too, because they're competing on a regular basis. They've just had a lot of adversity here over the last few weeks.
Yeah, certainly have. Kevin, thank you so much for the time today, and enjoy the rest of St. Patty's Day. Take a break from the office at some point. I know it's a little bit of March Madness going on out here, but indulge and keep enjoying the process.
Well, I'll peek out at the basketball, and if I see you walking around, Duffer, with a green beer, I know you're enjoying yourself. So have some fun, guys.
We have a broadcast tonight.
Oh, that's true. You got to work, man. Okay. Well, then
no drinking past 2:00. No drinking past 2:00. It's a 9:00 start. So
fair enough. All right, guys. Have a great day.
Thanks, Kevin.